I'm 78 years old, and it took me over 50 years to realize I was living my life completely wrong. Not in a loud, obvious way. Nothing you'd see in a movie. No big collapse. No dramatic moment where everything fell apart overnight. It was quieter than that. Slower. The kind of mistake that feels right while you're making it, and only shows itself when there's not much time left to fix it. For most of my life, I thought I was doing everything the way a man is supposed to. I worked hard. I showed up every day. I kept my head down, didn't complain, didn't ask for much. I believed that if I just stayed steady, everything else would take care of itself. And for a long time, it looked like it was working. I had a job that paid the bills, a house that slowly felt like something I built with my own two hands, a family that depended on me. From the outside, it probably looked like I had things figured out, that I was one of those men who knew what mattered and stayed focused on it. But here's the truth I didn't see back then. You can spend your whole life doing what feels responsible and still end up missing what actually matters. The strange part is, no one really warns you about it. Or maybe they do, but it doesn't land. Not when you're younger. When you've got energy, goals, pressure on your shoulders, you don't stop to question the path. You just keep walking it. I remember thinking, this is what I'm supposed to do. Provide, protect, keep things running. That was enough, I thought. That had to be enough. And years went by like that. Decades, really. One day turned into the next. Workdays blurred together. Weekends came and went. Birthdays, dinners, little moments in between. They all just kind of passed through my hands without me realizing how important they were. I told myself I'd slow down later, that there would be time. There's always time, until there isn't. It didn't hit me all at once. That's the part that still gets me. There wasn't some big wake-up call where everything stopped and I finally saw the truth clearly. No, it crept in slowly, quietly, a feeling at first, then a thought I couldn't shake, and eventually a realization that settled in so deep I couldn't ignore it anymore. By the time I understood what I had been sacrificing, most of my life was already behind me, and what I lost wasn't something I could earn back. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You think you're building something solid, something that will last. You think all those long hours, all that effort, all those years of pushing forward are leading somewhere meaningful. But sometimes, without even realizing it, you're trading away the very things you'll one day wish you had protected the most. And when it finally clicks, when you finally see it clearly, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels quiet, heavy, like sitting in a room you've been in your whole life, and suddenly noticing what's missing. And when that moment came for me, I realized what I had sacrificed, and it wasn't worth it. I grew up in a different kind of America than the one you see today. Things were simpler back then, or at least they felt that way. You didn't have as many choices, and maybe because of that, you didn't spend much time questioning the path you were on. My father was a quiet man, worked with his hands, came home tired, sat at the table, and didn't say much unless it needed saying. But you always knew where you stood with him. He believed in one thing more than anything else: work. Honest work. The kind that puts food on the table and keeps a roof over your family's head. That's what I learned growing up, not through long talks or advice, but just by watching him. You wake up early, you do your job, and you don't complain. That was the standard. That was what being a man looked like to me. By the time I was in my 20s, I had already made up my mind about what my life would be. I didn't chase dreams or take big risks. I just wanted something steady, something reliable, a job I could hold on to, something that would let me build a life the same way my father did. And when I got that job, I held on to it like it was everything. I still remember the feeling of that first real paycheck. It wasn't about the money as much as what it meant. It meant I was on the right track, that I was becoming the kind of man I was supposed to be. Not long after that, I met my wife. She had this way about her, calm, patient, the kind of person who made everything feel a little lighter just by being there. We didn't have some dramatic love story. It wasn't like the movies. It was steady, comfortable, real. And back then, that felt like more than enough. We got married, started building a life together, piece by piece. A small place at first, then something a little bigger as the years went on. We had kids. I can still remember holding them when they were babies, thinking to myself, this is it. This is what it's all for. And I meant that. But somewhere along the way, my focus shifted. Not all at once, just little by little. Work started taking up more of my time. There were always reasons for it. Extra hours meant more security. A promotion meant a better future. I told myself I was doing it for them, for my wife, for my kids. And in a way, I was. But I also stopped noticing things. I missed dinners here and there, told myself I'd make it up the next night. I came home tired, distracted, thinking about work even when I was sitting in my own living room. The kids would talk, my wife would ask about my day, and I'd listen just enough to respond, but not enough to really be there. At the time, it didn't feel like I was losing anything. It just felt like responsibility. That was the word we used back then. Responsibility. You carry it, no matter what it costs you. You don't stop and ask if there's another way. You just keep going. Years passed like that. The kids grew up faster than I expected. One day they needed help with everything. The next, they were figuring things out on their own. My wife kept everything together in ways I didn't fully appreciate at the time. She filled in the gaps I didn't even realize I was leaving behind. And I kept working, day after day, year after year, providing, building, staying focused. From the outside, it looked like a good life, a stable life, the kind of life people respect. And for a long time, I believed that too. I believed that as long as I was doing my part, earning, supporting, keeping things steady, that everything else would naturally fall into place. I didn't see what was quietly slipping through my fingers. Not yet. It didn't happen on some dramatic day. No storm, no shouting, no moment where everything cracked open at once. If I'm honest, that's what makes it harder to talk about, because I can't point to one single thing and say, that's when my life changed. It was after I retired. I remember my last day at work pretty clearly. They brought in a cake, said a few kind words, shook my hand, told me I'd earned it, and I believed them. I walked out of that building thinking I was stepping into the best part of my life. No more early mornings, no more long hours, just time, finally time. But the thing about time is, if you don't know what to do with it, it gets real heavy. The first few days felt fine, almost like a vacation. I slept in a little, sat with my coffee longer than usual, looked around the house like I was seeing it for the first time in years. But after a while, something started to feel off. The phone didn't ring as much as I expected. I told myself, people were busy. My kids had their own lives, their own families. That's normal. That's what's supposed to happen, right? You raise them, they grow up, they move on. Still, I thought there'd be more. One afternoon, I decided to call my son just to check in. Nothing serious. When he picked up, he sounded surprised. Not in a bad way, just surprised, like I'd caught him off guard. We talked for a few minutes. Simple things. Work, weather, how the kids were doing. There were pauses in the conversation that felt longer than they should have. I didn't know what to say, and it felt like he didn't either. At one point, I said, "We should get together sometime." And he said, "Yeah, that'd be nice." But there was something in his voice, not cold, not rude, just distant, like we were two people who knew each other, but didn't really know each other anymore. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. I started thinking about how many times I'd said those same words over the years. "We'll spend time later. I'm busy right now. Maybe next week." I always thought there'd be another chance, another moment when things would slow down and I could make up for it. But now that I finally had the time, I didn't have the closeness. That realization didn't hit me like a punch. It was slower than that. It settled in piece by piece, like something you don't want to admit, but can't ignore. I started noticing it more. Visits felt shorter. Conversations stayed on the surface. My kids were polite, respectful, but there was a space between us that hadn't always been there. Or maybe it had, and I just hadn't seen it before. I remember sitting in my living room one evening, the house quiet, thinking to myself, I did everything I was supposed to do, didn't I? I worked hard. I provided. I kept things stable. So why did it feel like something was missing? That's when the questions started. Questions I'd never allowed myself to ask before. Was being there financially enough? How many moments had I brushed past without realizing their importance? How many times had I chosen work when I could have chosen them? And the hardest one of all, had I spent my whole life building something while slowly losing the people I was building it for? That thought stayed with me. It didn't go away, and the more I sat with it, the clearer it became. The life I thought I had built so carefully wasn't what I thought it was at all. After that realization, the days started to feel different, longer, quieter. It's strange how silence changes when you begin to notice it. Before, it felt like peace, something you earned after a long day. But now it felt heavy, like it had something to say, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I'd wake up in the morning with nowhere I needed to be, no schedule, no deadlines. For most of my life, that would have sounded like freedom. But instead, it felt like I was drifting, like I had spent so many years running in one direction that I didn't know how to stand still. I tried to fill the time, little things at first, watching television, fixing things around the house that didn't really need fixing, taking longer walks than usual. But none of it stuck. None of it gave me the feeling I thought it would, because the truth was, it wasn't time I was missing before. It was connection. And now that I finally saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I started reaching out more, calling my kids, asking if they wanted to come by, offering to visit them instead. Sometimes it worked. We'd sit together, talk about their lives, their work, their kids. And those moments, they meant more to me than I can put into words. But there was still something missing, a closeness that should have been there, but wasn't. I could feel it in the way conversation stayed safe, surface level. We didn't talk about anything deep, anything personal, not because they didn't care, but because we had never built that kind of relationship in the first place. That realization hurt more than anything, because it wasn't something that had been taken from me. It was something I had never really created. I remember one evening sitting across from my daughter at her kitchen table. She was telling me about her day, and I was listening, really listening this time. And there was a moment where she paused, like she wanted to say something more, something real. But then she just smiled and changed the subject. And I knew why. Because I had spent years teaching her, without saying it out loud, that I wasn't the person you open up to like that. I was the one who worked, the one who provided, the one who made sure everything stayed in place. But not the one you went to with your feelings. That stayed with me, more than any quiet house or missed phone call. And then there was my wife. She had been there through all of it, through the long hours, the late nights, the times I said, "I'm too tired," or "maybe later." She never made a big scene about it, never demanded more than I was willing to give. At the time, I thought that meant everything was fine. Now I see it differently. Now I see the patience it must have taken, the loneliness she probably carried without ever putting it into words, the way she filled in the emotional gaps for our children while I stayed focused on everything else. We still sat together in the evenings, but even that felt different now. There were things I wanted to say, things I should have said years ago, but I didn't know how to start. It felt like trying to learn a language I should have spoken my whole life. The regret, the guilt, the quiet understanding that I had been present in the physical sense, but absent in the ways that mattered more. I never told my kids how often I thought about those missed moments. Never told my wife how much I appreciated what she carried for all those years. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I had spent so long not saying those things, that even now, when I wanted to, the words didn't come easily. And that's the part that stays with you. Not just what you lost, but what you never learned how to give. Somewhere along the way, after enough quiet mornings and long afternoons, I stopped trying to distract myself from those thoughts and started sitting with them instead. That's when things began to change. Not on the outside. My life still looked the same. Same house, same routines, same people. But inside, something shifted. I started looking back at my life with a different kind of honesty. Not the kind where you justify things or explain them away, but the kind where you finally tell yourself the truth. And the truth was simple, even if it was hard to accept. I had spent most of my life chasing the wrong definition of success. I thought success meant stability, a steady paycheck, a house that was paid off, bills handled, responsibilities met. I thought if I could give my family a comfortable life, then I was doing everything right. And I wasn't wrong exactly. Those things matter, but they're not the things people remember when the years start to add up. Nobody sits around in their later years thinking about how many hours they worked or how consistent they were at their job. That stuff fades. What stays are the moments, the conversations, the feeling of being known, of being close to the people you love. And that's what I had misunderstood. I had given my time to things that could be replaced, and taken my time away from things that couldn't. That realization doesn't hit you all at once. It settles in slowly, like a weight you learn to carry. You start remembering things differently. Moments you barely noticed at the time suddenly come back with more meaning than they ever had before. A birthday I missed because I had to stay late. A school event I said I'd make it to, but didn't. Even small things like sitting at the dinner table but not really being present, nodding along while my mind was somewhere else. At the time, those things felt small, harmless even, but they add up. That's what nobody tells you when you're younger. It's not one big decision that shapes your life. It's 1,000 small ones. And most of them don't feel important in the moment, until one day you look back and realize they were. I've had to come to terms with that, with the fact that I can't go back and change those choices. I can't rewind time and show up in the ways I wish I had. That part stays with you. But there's also something else that comes with age, if you let it. Clarity. You start to see what truly matters, not in theory, but in a real lived way. You understand that love isn't something you prove through effort alone. It's something you show through presence, through attention, through the simple act of being there, fully, without distraction. I used to think providing was enough. Now I know it was only part of it. A rest, the more important part, was something I overlooked for far too long. Connection. Real, honest connection. The kind that takes time, patience, and a willingness to be open, even when it's uncomfortable. I didn't learn that when I was young. I learned it after most of my life had already passed. And if I'm being honest, that's the regret that never fully leaves you. Not because you failed completely, but because you came so close to understanding and just missed it. Still, I've made peace with it as much as I can. I can't change the years behind me, but I can understand them. And sometimes, that understanding is the only thing you have left to give meaning to it all. If you've listened this far, I want to talk to you directly, not as someone who has everything figured out, but as someone who took too long to understand something simple. Don't wait. Whatever it is you think you'll get around to later, don't wait. I know how easy it is to believe there's more time. I believed that for most of my life. I thought I could put things off just for now and come back to them when things slowed down, when work settled, when life got a little easier. But life doesn't really slow down the way you expect it to. It just moves on. And the people in your life, they move with it. Your kids grow up while you're busy making plans for someday. Your partner learns to live with less of your attention than they deserve. And all those little chances you had to be present, to listen, to connect, they pass by quietly, without making a scene. That's the part that makes it dangerous. You don't notice what you're losing while you're losing it. So if there's anything I can give you from all these years, it's this. Be there. Not just physically, not just sitting in the same room while your mind is somewhere else. I mean, really be there. Put things down. Look at the people you love. Listen when they talk, even if it's something small or something you've heard before. Those small moments, they're not small. They're everything. Don't assume people know how you feel. Say it, even if it feels awkward, even if you didn't grow up that way. Tell your kids you're proud of them. Tell your partner you appreciate them. Say the things that matter while there's still time for them to hear it. Because one day you might want to, and you won't get the chance the same way. And don't measure your life only by what you've built or achieved. I did that. I thought if I could create something stable, something secure, that it would all add up to a meaningful life. And in some ways, it did. But it wasn't the part that filled the empty spaces later on. What fills those spaces are people, the memories you share with them, the conversations you took the time to have, the moments where you chose them over everything else. That's what stays. That's what matters when everything else fades into the background. I'm not telling you to stop working or ignore your responsibilities. Life doesn't work that way. But don't let those responsibilities become your whole identity. Don't let them take more than they should. Because the truth is, no matter how much you give to your work, it won't sit beside you when you're old. It won't remember your effort. People will, or they won't, depending on how you showed up in their lives. I've had to accept that I learned this lesson late. Too late to change some things, but not too late to understand them and maybe pass that understanding on to you. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't spend your whole life building something only to realize you are slowly losing everything that mattered.